Hello, welcome to Wardrobe School. I'm Vanya, as you probably know, and this is a crash class for you to learn how to use your sewing machine. I hear from a lot of you guys that you have a sewing machine but you're scared of using, or you never opened in your box, or you haven't started, or you want to buy a sewing machine but you don't know how to get started basically. And it's very simple, and obviously if you want to sew or if you want to upcycle clothes, the first thing you need to know is how to operate a sewing machine, right? Of course you can do sewing by hand, but the sewing machine makes the process much faster and more fun. So I'm going to show you, the functions of the sewing machines, the stitches and all the basics, because every machine is different, but most of them have the same basic features. But also we're going to start from the very beginning, right? So if you don't have a sewing machine, or if you have one and you never used it, let's talk about it, right? First. So the first thing you have to do is to clean your sewing machine. And that is if it's an old one, right? So there are different cases, right? If it's brand new and you got it, it's like you just open the box, then you don't have to worry about it, because from factory, usually they have the machines ready to work, and they are oiled, they're ready, and you can just start sewing. Then that's the second part of the video. But if you bought a used one, or if you have one in the closet for years that you haven't used, or somebody gave it to you, a used one, you have to consider that it might be stuck, or it might be like kind of rusty, kind of like funny. So you have to take care of it before you start even trying sew with it, okay? Because you have to have the machine. It's like a car, right? If a car is sitting for like a year or two, you can't just start driving, right? You have to warm it up and all. Okay, so let's talk about if you have an old sewing machine that it's been sitting for a while. The first thing you have to do is to clean it up. Okay, so you gotta clean it. You have a brush, right? If sometimes the machine has its own brush, or if not, you find at stores, it can be a paintbrush or anything, and then you just dust it off, take all the dust out underneath everywhere, especially where the bobbin case goes. I'll show you how all this inside the machine later on in the video. But just make sure you clean it, everything. And after cleaning, you want to put oil in the sewing machine. You want to oil the parts where it needs to be moving, right? The moving parts. And you wonder, like, where are the moving parts? You don't want to throw oil all over the machine, right? So you must find out where are the oiling spots of your sewing machine. And for that, you need the manual, right? So how you get a manual? Most of machine manuals are available online. So you have to know the brand of your sewing machine and the model of it, right? So if it has like a number or some sort of model, then you go on Google and find the manual to download the PDF. Most of the times you find the PDF for free, and then you can just download and look on the computer or print it. Or sometimes you have to buy from eBay, and it's like a few dollars or something like that. But it's important, because you really need to know how the machine works if it's used, right? Even to fix it, if you get an old sewing machine, it's good, because then you can almost fix it yourself if you get into that, okay? Before we start going into like how to use it and what to do with it, I know we talked about before on my Instagram about old sewing machines, that, something that I like to have. And this one is not an old one. It's kind of older. It's probably like, I'd say at least 10 years old or 20. But it's a plastic sewing machine, and it works. It's not bad. We had a discussion on Instagram, and now people are like, oh, but mine is plastic. But so let me tell you, I rather not have a plastic sewing machine. I rather have a metal one. I have a few reasons for that. One is that it's heavier. So when it's a metal body, when you're sewing, if you're sewing like heavy fabric, a plastic sewing machine is going to move around. You can't handle, it won't like handle the heaviness of certain fabrics. And a metal one is just going to be like tough and hold it. And because I like to make bags, and I like to sew all sort of materials, so I like to have a metal sewing machine, okay? The second reason is they're better. I know there are new ones, of course. If you buy like a new Bernina for like $3,000-$4,000, it's gonna be great. But if you get like a $100 sewing machine, it's not gonna be as good as an old one. So depending on your budget, when if you don't have a sewing machine yet, and if you have a couple $100, I would buy a used old one. And when I say old, I would recommend you find the metal ones, or those that have mostly metal in its body, and kind of like older before the 90s, the 1990s, because that's the time when Singer company sold the company, went public, and then it just stopped making in the USA, and a certain, it went to make, it's like cheaply made ever since. Most of those old sewing machines, they're simple and it's easy to fix. Parts are still possible to find. People are even printing parts nowadays. If it's some rare machine, you don't need to have a rare machine, okay? But usually if it's an older Singer, Bernina, or an older Elna, those brands that are like well made, you're good. And then those are gonna last forever probably, or as long as you wanna make. And it's not gonna give you much problem, okay? If it's working, usually works, you oil it, you keep the maintenance, and you're good, okay? Now let's go for the details of the sewing machine, or what functions does it have, and what do you need to sew the basics, right? If you don't want to get it too fancy, you don't need to make much. It depends on what you want to make, but usually to make clothes and just like simple fabrics and the basics, I'm going to show you what you have to look for in a sewing machine and how you get started with it. So after cleaning and oiling your machine, the first thing you wanted to do is to put your threads, to thread the machine, right? Because that's how it's going to stitch. Keep in mind that a sewing machine has two threads. It's a top thread and a bottom thread, right? Because that's how it works. It's like two threads interlacing each other. That's how the seam happens, okay? For you to thread it, you have to look at your manual as well, or look on YouTube for the specific model of your machine. But usually home machines are very simple to thread, just goes through here and then goes to the needle, okay? One important thing to know is about the tension of the machine, okay? So we have all these adjustments here. The two most important adjustments the machine has are the two tensions, so the top tension and the bottom tension. And that goes for both threads, the top thread and the bottom thread, right? And that's what makes the stitch a little tighter or looser, and that's because they interlace each other. Ideally, they have to be equal, right? So they have to have the same tension on top and bottom when the stitch happens, so they meet in the middle, and like hopefully you won't see the bottom thread on the top and the top thread on the bottom. So I recommend you to first test with a different color for the top and a different color for the bottom. So then you can see which one is coming from and which one is loose, or you need to adjust or anything. If your machine is brand new, usually comes adjusted, the tension works, but actually you have to change it sometimes. Unfortunately, we have to mess with the tension of our machines, because depending on the fabric we're using, sometimes you change the needle. For instance, I love doing embroidery, and then there's a different tension for different embroidery kinds that I do. So, you have to understand the tension. Usually the one on top is the one that you adjust more often, especially like newer machines, plastic machines like that. They made a way that the bottom thread, you don't even mess much with the tension, but I'll show you how you can adjust if you need to, if your machine is adjustable, okay? For the top tension, you can see here how is numbers, right? So the basic number usually is 3. So I usually leave on 3, 4, something like that. The smaller the number, the tighter the tension is, and the larger, the looser it is, okay? So usually keep a 3 to, it's from like 3 to 5. It really depends on the machine you have, okay? And that's for the top thread. And that's why I was talking about threading the machine. It has to pass through the tension. So my tension is here, and so my thread has to go around it, and then it goes through the the pressure of the tension, right? That's very important. If it doesn't, that's one of the problems that I see a lot of my students having. Sometimes they don't know why is it wrong. It's because they forgot to put through the tension, or something is funny with the tension of the machine. Most of the machines jamming problems, stitch not going well, is because the tension, okay? So that's the top tension. Now the bottom tension is the bobbin, right? Let me grab my bobbin case here. So when it is a bobbin case, the bobbin goes in there. When it's possible to remove, if your machine has a removable bobbin case like this, it is possible to adjust the tension on it, okay? You find here a little screw let's see, right there, you see? There's a little screw here, and then you can tighten or loosen up this screw. And it's very subtle. You do like half a circle, half a, 6 o'clock, turn like just half of the circle, and it's already adjusted a little. And then you keep testing. You don't want to do like too much, with the screwdriver. You don't want to twist it much because then it's going to be too tight. And then you test with holding the thread like this. You see, this one is a little tight. Usually, ideally, you do like this and it will fall, but with some tension, okay? And that's a thing that you have to learn about your machine and how it works, because it's different for each machine. Some machines have, especially the newer ones, they have a loading case that's, you load it from the top here. So you just drop the bobbin right here. You open like a little plastic thing here that's clear usually, and then you put the bobbin right there. It doesn't have a removable bobbin case. In that case, you can't really adjust it unless there's something in your manual that tells you that you could. But I have machines like that, and you cannot adjust the tension of the bobbin. Okay, then just always make sure that you're placing the bobbin correctly on your bobbin case. There is this little thing here that passes, and that's exactly where the tension happens. There's two metal parts here, and they create that pressure and then holds the thread and does the tension. Okay, so then you pass it here, and then your thread should come from this little space here, and that's good. And then you place it on your machine, and the position for mine is like this. There is like a little slot in there, so then I just place this part on my slot, and it clicks when I place it in there. See, it just clicked, and that's good. So then I can close the little door there. But before that, one tip for you: after you thread the top of your machine following your manual, especially in home machines, you wanted to grab the bottom thread with your top thread. See how I'm holding it here with my left hand? So I just hold it there, and then I turn my wheel towards myself, and look how it's gonna grab the bottom thread and bring it up. It's right there. See? Now I have two threads on top, the thread tail, right? So then I put behind the foot right there. I close it here, and it's ready to sew. Okay? So that's how you thread it. I can't really tell you that every machine is going to be like that, but that's the basic. That's a very simple machine. Okay? Then there's the light, right? Some machines, you turn it on and off. This one doesn't have an on and off switch. All it has is a button for the light. See, there's like a little light bulb right there. So the other thing you have to care about is, and you know about your machine, is the stitch, the size of your stitch, right? Because if you look at a pocket on a dress shirt, you see how the pocket is attached with a very tiny stitch. So that's like a small stitch. It's a short length of the stitch, okay? And then there's the width of the stitch. So two things about the stitch are the length and the width. In this machine, I have the stitch length controller here, but my width is not really controllable, kind of, but it's not. Sometimes there's a button that you can just control the stitch manually like that, the width manually, okay? But in this case, in this one, it's not. I just have a few options. That's why you have to see on your machine how it works, right? You see how the foot, there's a lifter in the back here. Look at my right hand, right? So you always thread the machine with the foot lifted. And why is that? That's because when you lift the foot, there's a mechanism in the machine that makes the tension loose. It loosens up the tension. So then you thread it, and it's nice and loose for you to thread the whole machine. Then you pull the bottom thread up, and then you can lower the foot after you put the fabric there, right? So that's the plan, okay? So I put the foot there, and I lowered my foot. Now I'm gonna stitch. And look, I'm in a stitch length size 3, right? Then I lift my foot, pull the thread, and cut it. And then I'll show you the length look at this length, right? It's kind of like large, long, right? It could be a little less. I usually like to work with 3. On this machine, 3 is a good size, and it varies according to the machine. So now I'm gonna do a very little one. So I'll twist like, that's how it will be for the dress shirt pocket, right? So let's see how it goes. So I lower my foot, and then see how it goes, like slow. It's not slower, but it's stitching more per inch, right? More stitches per inch, and they are shorter. Look how different it is, right? So this is 3, this is 1. Now I'm going to do a very wide, very long one. 4 is my longest one. And another tip for you, every time you sew, when you're starting something, you want to have the thread tail towards the back. Every time, okay? So you have the needle up, the thread tail back, and then you can place the fabric. Lower the foot, and then run. Lift the foot, pull the thread, and look, 4. Oops, here, 4, 3.5, and 1. Okay, so that's the stitch length. Now, the width here doesn't really exist, right? Because we're just doing straight stitch. But when we go to zigzag, then it's when stitch length, stitch width comes in. And so I'm gonna go to the 3, length 3, so it's like a basic length. And here on this machine, I can change. Look, I'm on a straight stitch. I don't know if you can see there, but it says straight stitch, which is number 3. Then if I go 4, it's a zigzag. It's like a small zigzag. So let's see how it looks. Put the thread towards the back. Lower the foot and run. Look, this is the small zigzag, right? So the 4 number here, and with the 3 stitch length. I could make a very long length or a short length with this width, or just, and then, you know, you can play with this between the width and the length, things will change, right? So now I'm gonna move to the 5, which is a little wider. I didn't mess with the length, I'm just messing with the width, right? Look how much bigger the 5 is, right? And then I can also, let's say I'll keep on 5 width, right? It's like how wide it goes, but I'll do a very tiny, almost 1.5 length. Look how different, right? Because my length is shorter, so the zigzag is closer, but the width is the same. Now if I go to the widest zigzag, that's number 6, and keep that length, let's see what happens. And that's it. Look, very wide, shorter length, and that's the result. So you see the varieties of zigzag stitch we have, right? And it's good for you to test. Just take a rag, a piece of fabric, a piece of scrap, and keep testing. See how your stitches go. The other thing, I'm not going to show you all of them here, but this machine has a lot of different stitches. So I have many different options here. And to move them, I like to have the needle up And let's see which one. The 13 is kind of cool. Let's see how it looks. Look how cool, right? That's a different stitch. But you don't need many stitches to sew clothing, okay? You basically just need the straight stitch and the zigzag stitch, all right? The other thing is important for you to know in your machine is the reverse. What's a reverse? Reverse is the way that you can lock a stitch. Think about it when you sew something, again, the pocket, right? If you're sewing a pocket on a piece of clothing, a pocket is a place where we use a lot, right? We put our hands in there and then we grab things, and it could just come apart if you don't reinforce the stitch. So you want to lock the stitch at the first, when you first started sewing, you want to lock the stitch, and that's what the reverse is for. The reverse makes the stitch go back and forth, so it makes it back, then you let it go forward and backward, and that way it locks it. And then it's more safe. Look, I'm going to show you here. Okay, so I go forward, and then if I click on reverse, it moves forward, backward. So backward, forward, backward, forward. You see? So that makes the stitch very strong, and it won't come apart. Okay, so test your reverse, and there again, it's different for each machine. Some are a button here, or sometimes it's like a little lever thing, but usually there's most of the machines, unless some very old ones that don't have, most of them have the reverse button. If yours doesn't have it, if you have like a very old machine, the way to do it is that you sew forward, and then you lift the foot, turn the piece back, sew the other way, turn around, and do like a few times. At least 3 times is good enough to lock the stitch. Okay, now let's see how you can wind the bobbin. So here it is, right? I have my bobbin. This is a plastic bobbin. Some machines have metal bobbins and it's better, or you can probably buy a metal one for this one. This is the one that came with. I bought this machine used, so this is what I have, right? Then again, you have to look at your manual to find out how do you do for specifically your type of machine, but it's always very similar, okay? And again, what we need is tension, right? So a thread always needs tension. What we have here for this one is, this part where the thread goes that doesn't have tension, and this just goes through the needle because the tension is down there. But then when I want to do the bobbin, see the drawing here? I have to pass the thread through this thing because this has a little pressure, and that's where the tension goes. So I'm going to pass it through here and then take it towards the bobbin winder, which is this button, and you see how it goes to the right? That's when it's ready to wind the bobbin. The machine understands when you do that and you run the machine, this is going to run. Look, this thing. Okay, but before I have to remove my bobbin there so it doesn't jam. You never want to run the machine with the bobbin inside. Okay, now I'm going to grab the thread, pass through the little thing here, and then the bobbin usually has like a hole, so I go from the inside towards the outside and pass the thread through this hole. Look, like that. I don't know if you can see it, but you see how it's there. And then I place on my winder before I move to the side, put it there, and now it's all like in the tension mode. Oh, it has to go through here still. All right, my foot has to be up to do this operation. So I'm holding the thread, and then I move the bobbin to the side, right, like I just showed you, to the right, and then it's ready to wind. and then I run it. I hold still this little thread here just so it goes to get started. Then I can cut this tail and it go. And so now it's filled all the way. Some machines will pop and bring this thing back to the left, telling you like it's filled to as much as possible. This one doesn't, so I just do it myself, remove the bobbin, and it's good to sew, all right? So now that you know how to use the machine, the very basics of your machine, let's talk about the accessories that come with, right? This one I got used, so it came with what it had and that's it. But you know, you'll find different things, different pieces. I'll just tell you the few ones that I like to have and what they're for, what they're used for, right? So the first one that I use a lot is the free motion embroidery one, which they call the darning thing, right? And what is the darning? The darning is when you know when you're gonna darn some piece of clothing or to do embroidery or quilting. And that means the machine, you know, the teeth, I call it, in Portuguese, in Brazil, we call this teeth, but it's called the feed dogs, right? It feeds dogs because the dogs that feed the fabric. It's this like little piece of metal here that when the machine, if you move your wheel, you see how that little thing moves. That's what pulls the fabric towards the back when you're sewing, right? So it moves forward, okay? And you need, if you want to do embroidery, which, you know, free motion embroideries, because you do the draw, you do the direction, then you remove the foot and the feed dog should be not used. So sometimes there's a button on the machine that you lower the feed dogs so they're not working. Or in this case of my machine, it's a cover. So I just cover my feed dogs. Look. And then they won't work when I have the fabric there. Okay, so that's one thing I like to have on a machine. Usually most, you know, I have a lot of machines and this is the only one that needs this cover. Most of machines have a button or some sort of screw or something that lower my feed dogs, okay? That's one thing. And then the foot, right? So how do you remove the foot of the machine? It's something that you can remove. So I can unscrew here. There's a little big screw, and see, I remove the foot. And that's the basic foot, that's zigzag and straight stitch. But it's two pieces actually, look, because I can just remove this part, right? So this is the support, which goes screwed to the bar here. But then this piece you can change for different ones. And then you can use this one that is for a straight stitch only. See how there is only a little hole, right, where the needle goes through, and it will fit here. Look. Right? Or let's see what else. I don't think I have many here. Oh, this one is to sew buttons, which I rarely do. But look, you can sew the button. I think it's like this actually. Like that. So you place on a fabric and then you sew the button. The button, it's like a little rubber thing, so it keeps it grips on the button. And one I like is the zipper foot, which in this case is this one. It doesn't need this part. You can just, I think, let's see. Yeah, you can just screw there because it doesn't really, you know, you then use the screw and place it there. But this is, I don't think it's original of the machine, or it is, I'm not sure. But see how it has this like little space here. That's where the needle goes very close, so you can sew the zipper on a piece, okay? But zipper is another conversation, right, that we're gonna have another day. All right, but that's the basics, the things that I like. So there is like a free motion embroidery foot, which is the darning foot. This machine doesn't have, or I do just without a foot. But the feet that I like is the zigzag and straight stitch, this one that's basic. the zipper to sew zippers, and I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and there's one here, which is the buttonhole one. This makes buttonholes. So you place it here. It's like this. I know it looks like crazy to be a foot, right? But it goes right there. And then you can, with the zigzag, the buttonhole is made on a size that you choose according to the button you have. Okay, and then that's another class that I'll show you how to make buttonholes. But this is the buttonhole foot. All right, so that's about it for the accessories. This machine also came with the little screwdriver. And then I also have, it has double needle, which is also another class. I don't use double needle, twin needle, right? Some people call it. I don't use it much, but it's cool to do top stitch and stuff. And then one thing we didn't talk about it's needles, right? So usually home machines use the same kind of needles. Is this size, I forgot which one, but you just have to care about what kind of fabric you're using. This one, for instance, is for jersey. So if I'm sewing knits, the jersey needle has like a little ball point so it doesn't make holes on my knits. And then there's different thickness of needles for, you know, if you're working with thick fabric, you have like a heavier one. There's the jeans needle that's great for when you're sewing canvas and jeans and like heavy material. And then when you do embroidery, I usually use like a size 12 or 14. But usually the needle that I use is size 12, the thickness, right? When it comes to thickness, because that fits, it's pretty much like for all fabrics for clothing, unless I'm sewing like heavy materials. Most like simple materials is the size 12, okay? So then, and again, you have to try, test. Usually the machine comes with a couple needles, and I really like the Schmetz brand because it's quality and it lasts longer and it doesn't break as easily. Okay, but if your machine breaks the needle, don't get scared. That's normal. It happens to everyone, and you're learning, so it will happen probably, but don't get scared. All right. All right. So I hope that was helpful. Keep in mind, all machines are good unless it's like very cheap ones that you buy online. You know, the little ones. That's the only machine I really don't recommend you to have because it's not gonna last much. But most machines they work for what you want to do. If you have a question like what kind of machine I need, you don't need anything fancy. You just need a machine that's working, that's oiled, clean, and make sure that you keep it clean. If you use for a couple weeks, clean it, you know, brush it all around where the bobbin case is and all that. And that's it. It's simple. Just start with a simple stitch. Take a piece of fabric that's not important, an old shirt or something that's not jersey. Don't start, if you never sewed anything, don't start from a t-shirt material. You want some fabric that's not stretchy, and then you start stitching. Try all the different stitches you have. Try the zigzag, play with the width and the length of the stitch. Don't mess much with the tension because that's like kind of complicated. But if you do, and if you have issues, let me know and I'll help you. I hope I covered everything, like at least the basics to get you going and get you started with your sewing machine. And if you have any questions, let me know and I'll make more videos. All right? Thank you very much and have fun with